Beloved souls, today I stand before you to declare a truth so radiant, so undeniable, that once it is grasped, it changes the very atmosphere of your life. The truth is this: God is my financial shepherd, and because of this, I shall not want. For too long, the world has taught us to toil, to strive, to labor under the heavy yoke of fear. Fear of bills, fear of debt, fear of not enough. But let me tell you this: the shepherd has no fear, and the sheep under his care never hunger nor thirst. He leads them into green pastures, not by force, but by guidance. He restores their souls, and in restoring the soul, he restores the purse, the wallet, the bank account. When I surrendered my finances to God, I discovered something extraordinary. Money was no longer a struggle, no longer a cruel master, no longer a source of sleepless nights. It became a servant, an instrument flowing through the divine current of supply. For money is not struggle, money is energy, and energy follows faith, gratitude, and expectancy. Hear this truth: fear closes the gates of abundance, but trust flings them wide open. Each time I whispered, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," a door opened, a way was made, a need was met. The world says, "Hustle harder." The shepherd says, "Rest in me, and I will show you where the treasure lies." I have seen miracles that no calculation could explain. Unexpected provision arriving at the perfect moment, debts dissolved like mist before the morning sun, opportunities appearing from unseen places. Was it chance? No. It was the shepherd leading me beside still waters of divine supply. Do not be deceived by appearances of lack. Lack is a shadow, a lie of limitation. The shepherd's truth is abundance, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. The sheep never question where the grass will come from tomorrow. They follow the shepherd, and the grass is already there. So it is with our finances. As we follow divine guidance, the provision is already prepared. And what seals the miracle? Gratitude. Gratitude before the blessing is the seed that multiplies the harvest. I began to thank God for money unseen, for provision not yet visible, and in that thanksgiving, I became magnetic to supply. My words were keys. My praise unlocked the storehouse of heaven, and the miracle was released. So why is God my financial shepherd? Because when I trust him, I lack nothing. Because he takes me from fear to faith, from debt to deliverance, from worry to wealth of peace. Because he proves again and again that the divine economy never crashes, never runs dry, never fails those who trust in him. And I tell you this, your life too can become a living testimony, not a testimony of endless struggle, but of miraculous provision. Not a story of lack, but of abundance that overflows. Let your finances be the stage upon which God's glory is revealed. Walk today in the assurance that the shepherd leads you. Declare it, believe it, embody it. God is my financial shepherd, I shall not want. And as you do, watch the money miracle unfold. Watch doors open that no man can shut, and watch your life become a beacon of faith, abundance, and divine supply. Beloved, the shepherd is calling. Follow him in faith, and you too will say with joy, "This is my money miracle." God, as the source of supply, is one of the greatest revelations a soul can ever receive, for it changes the very foundation upon which one stands. Most people believe their income is dependent on an employer, on the economy, on the stock market, or even on the generosity of others. They think the channels through which money comes are the source itself. But when you see through spiritual eyes, you realize that all of these are merely instruments, temporary channels used by an eternal source. The real supply is invisible, inexhaustible, and flowing directly from God, and it never runs dry. When you trust people, companies, or circumstances as your provider, you stand on shaky ground. The moment a job ends, a contract breaks, or the economy dips, fear rises like a storm. Yet when you anchor yourself in the truth that God himself is your supply, fear evaporates, and you become unshakable. God is the shepherd who never abandons his sheep. He is the wellspring of provision, the storehouse of all substance, the invisible power that moves through countless visible channels. The paycheck is not your source. The employer is not your source. God is. And when one channel closes, the source simply opens another. The world operates in a system of limitation, where resources appear scarce, competition is fierce, and people cling tightly to what little they think they have. But God's system is abundance, overflow, and expansion. When you see Him as your supply, you stop clinging to pennies in fear and open your hands to receive rivers of increase. The soul aligned with divine supply does not struggle or chase, it magnetizes. Money, opportunities, and ideas flow to the one who stands in the consciousness of God's abundance. This truth is written in the words of the psalmist, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." It does not say, "I may not want if I work enough hours," or "I shall not want if the market performs well." It is an absolute declaration. If the Lord is your shepherd, want disappears. To live in this declaration is to align with a spiritual law that transcends economics. It is to step out of fear and into faith, to move from lack, thinking into overflow consciousness. The sheep never worries where tomorrow's grass will grow. It simply follows the shepherd, and provision is already waiting. So many people ask, where will the money come from? How will the bills be paid? What if there isn't enough? These questions arise from a false assumption that supply is limited, that it is bound to visible circumstances. But when you understand God as your source, you replace these fearful questions with confident affirmations. The money will come from the right place, at the right time, in divine order. My supply is unlimited, for it flows from God. And as these affirmations take root, miracles happen. Unexpected checks arrive, debts are dissolved, doors open, and provision appears in ways beyond imagination. It is not human effort alone that sustains abundance, it is divine alignment. Effort without trust leads to exhaustion, but trust infused into effort multiplies results. A small step taken under God's guidance yields greater fruit than 1,000 anxious labors. When you let God lead, you find yourself in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, receiving the right opportunities. The shepherd not only provides but guides, protecting you from wrong turns, wasted energy, and financial pitfalls. To know God as your source is to live free from the tyranny of fear. It is to know that your supply does not depend on the favor of men, the swings of markets, or the state of the world. Your supply depends on divine law, which never fails. It is to rest in the assurance that even in the wilderness, manna will fall. Even in the drought, water will spring from the rock. Even in famine, the table will be spread before you. This truth becomes the anchor of peace, the doorway to abundance, and the very essence of the money miracle. The shepherd's guidance in finances is a truth so powerful, so liberating, that when embraced, it shifts the entire course of one's financial destiny. Too often people stumble through money matters like sheep without direction, chasing after fleeting opportunities, running into dead ends, and becoming entangled in fear and confusion. But when the shepherd is acknowledged, when divine guidance is invited into the realm of money, the path becomes clear, steady, and fruitful. Just as a shepherd leads his flock to green pastures and still waters, God leads his children to financial provision, safety, and abundance. He does not leave us wandering in uncertainty. He charts the way with perfect timing, perfect placement, and perfect protection. There are those who rely on human wisdom alone, thinking that success comes only by analysis, calculation, and relentless striving. But human wisdom without divine direction can lead to costly mistakes, empty pursuits, and doors that slam shut. The shepherd, however, knows the terrain ahead. He sees where the hidden dangers lie. deceptive schemes, unwise ventures, partnerships that would drain instead of bless. He also knows where the fields of prosperity are waiting, lush and overflowing, ready for those who are willing to follow his voice. To walk under his guidance is to avoid the traps of lack and to be led directly to streams of provision that cannot run dry. This guidance often comes as a gentle inner nudge, an idea whispered in the heart, a sudden knowing that rises with clarity. To the one who listens, these divine signals become the difference between loss and gain, between debt and deliverance, between missed opportunity and miraculous increase. The shepherd's voice is not the voice of confusion or fear. It is the voice of peace, wisdom, and assurance. It says, "This is the way, walk in it." And as you obey, doors open where walls once stood, and supply flows where lack once loomed. There have been moments when the outer world shouted lack, when the bank account was low, when every avenue seemed blocked, yet the shepherd whispered, "Wait." And in that waiting, the right door appeared, the right connection was made, the right opportunity unfolded. There have also been moments when fear said, "Hold back, it's too risky." Yet the shepherd said, "Step forward." And that step unlocked streams of income that fear would have denied. This is the miracle of guidance. It always leads to increase, never to loss. It always leads to life, never to destruction. The shepherd does not only guide into provision, but also shields from harm. How many times has a closed door, though painful in the moment, proven to be divine protection from financial disaster? How many times has a detour saved you from entering into agreements or contracts that would have drained your resources and peace? The shepherd knows, and because he knows, his guidance is perfect. Trusting him means trusting that every step, whether forward, paused, or turned aside, is orchestrated for your highest good. And in finances, timing is everything. Human impatience cries out, "I need it now," but the shepherd says, "I will provide in due season." That season is never late, never lacking, never insufficient. When the shepherd directs your finances, you are always in the right place at the right time. Opportunities come at the moment you are prepared to receive them, and provision arrives exactly when it is needed. This divine timing eliminates struggle, wipes away anxiety, and replaces chaos with perfect order. To live under the shepherd's guidance in finances is to know peace even in uncertainty, to trust even when appearances scream lack, to move forward even when logic says retreat. It is to lean not on your own understanding, but on divine wisdom that sees the end from the beginning. And the testimony of those who follow his guidance is always the same. "I once worried, but now I am led. I once feared, but now I trust. I once lacked, but now I overflow." For when the shepherd leads, the sheep never wander into famine. They are always guided to abundance, and in his guidance lies the secret of every financial miracle. Trust over fear is the great turning point in financial miracles, the dividing line between struggle and supply, between endless worry and overflowing abundance. Fear is the thief that sneaks into the heart, whispering, "What if there is not enough? What if the bills overwhelm you? What if tomorrow collapses and you are left with nothing?" And the more one listens to that voice, the tighter the grip becomes, the heavier the burden grows, and the smaller the flow of provision appears. But trust, glorious trust, is the key that swings open the gates of abundance. Trust declares with boldness, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Trust silences the voice of fear, lifts the soul above appearances, and draws supply from the unseen into the seen. Fear looks at the bank account and trembles, but trust looks at God and rests secure. Fear imagines disaster in every corner, but trust imagines miracles in every moment. Fear clutches and hoards, holding tightly to pennies in panic, but trust opens the hand in confidence, knowing that rivers of supply will flow again and again. Fear says, there is lack, but trust says there is abundance. Fear believes in struggle, but trust believes in divine order, and whichever voice you follow becomes the reality you live. Many people spend their lives in a tug of war between these two forces. On one side, fear pulls them back into limitation, telling them to never risk, never believe, never release. On the other side, trust calls them forward into faith, promising new doors, new provision, new miracles. And the moment you choose trust, even in the smallest way, you align yourself with divine supply. It does not take giant leaps to break fear's hold. Just one step of trust begins the process, one affirmation, one declaration, one refusal to bow to anxiety. I have seen time and again how fear blocks the flow of money. People make decisions in haste, gripped by panic, and end up in deeper lack. But when they breathe, when they pause, when they lean into trust, provision appears in unexpected ways. A bill that seemed impossible to pay dissolves. A door that looked forever closed swings wide. A blessing that seemed delayed arrives right on time. Trust creates the atmosphere where miracles are natural. Fear creates the storm, trust calms the waters, and let us be clear, trust is not passive. It is not sitting still in idleness while hoping for magic. Trust is an active force, a bold alignment with divine wisdom. Trust steps forward when guided, invests when led, gives when prompted, and speaks words of abundance when the world cries out lack. Trust acts as if God's promises are already fulfilled, because in truth they are. Trust lives in the reality of supply even before it is visible. It does not wait for proof, it creates proof. There are moments when fear will roar like a lion, especially when the world shakes, when news reports scream of collapse, when people all around are sinking in worry. But the one who trusts stands firm. The one who trusts says, "My source is not the economy, not the paycheck, not the opinion of man. My source is God, the shepherd of my finances, and he does not fail." That declaration is stronger than any fear, and in repeating it, the soul becomes unshakable. The miracle of trust is that it grows. The more you trust, the more you see provision. The more you see provision, the more you trust. It becomes a cycle of faith and manifestation, a spiral of ever-increasing abundance. Fear diminishes, shrinks, and dies when confronted with unwavering trust. And soon, what once felt impossible becomes normal. What once seemed miraculous becomes daily bread. To choose trust over fear is to choose life over death, abundance over lack, miracles over misery. It is the choice to walk with the shepherd, to believe in divine timing, to rest in divine order, to know that all things are working together for your good. And when trust reigns in your heart, lack loses its grip, and provision flows without end. Divine provision versus human struggle is the very contrast between living in the flow of heaven and living under the weight of earth. Human struggle says, if I just work harder, if I just push more, if I just strain and force and fight, then maybe I will have enough. It is the mindset of endless labor, of chasing money as though it were a cruel master who always demands more but never gives satisfaction. Human struggle is toil without rest, worry without end, and fear disguised as diligence. But divine provision is altogether different. Divine provision flows with ease, grace, and perfect timing. It is not about striving harder, but about aligning deeper, not about endless effort, but about trust in an unlimited source. When one steps into divine provision, what once felt heavy becomes light, what once felt impossible becomes inevitable, and what once drained the soul becomes the very testimony of abundance. The shepherd never intended his sheep to live in constant exhaustion. He leads them beside still waters, not raging torrents. He causes them to lie down in green pastures, not barren fields. Divine provision is rest for the soul, assurance for the mind, and increase for the body. It does not mean idleness. It means that every action taken under divine guidance carries the breath of heaven. A single step in the right direction produces more fruit than 1,000 frantic movements rooted in fear. Where human struggle burns out, divine provision multiplies. Where human struggle depletes, divine provision replenishes. Look around and see how the world exalts struggle. People are praised for being exhausted, for hustling without sleep, for laboring endlessly. But exhaustion is not abundance. Struggle is not success. For what good is gain if it robs the spirit of peace? What good is wealth if it costs the soul its joy? Divine provision is wealth with peace, increase with rest, abundance with joy. It is the miracle of more than enough without the bondage of endless struggle. When divine provision flows, things align effortlessly. The right person calls at the right time. The right opportunity appears when it is most needed. The contract, the client, the connection all arrive without frantic chasing. It is not coincidence, it is orchestration. It is the shepherd guiding the path so that doors open without strain and resources flow without begging. This is why those who trust the shepherd often testify of unexpected blessings and miraculous timing. These are not accidents. They are the evidence of divine provision at work. Human struggle, on the other hand, is marked by fear-driven choices. Fear says, take this opportunity quickly before it disappears. And one rushes, only to find it was a trap. Fear says, hold on tightly to what little you have. And in that clinging, the flow of new supply is blocked. Fear drives one to overwork, overspend, overcommit, and yet underlive. Struggle promises results but delivers fatigue. Divine provision promises peace and delivers abundance. There have been countless testimonies of those who laid down their struggle and chose to trust. The moment they surrendered, the moment they declared, I will let the shepherd guide me, the shift happened. Suddenly, what they chased began to chase them. The resources they begged for came knocking at their door. The bills that weighed heavily were paid in unexpected ways. This is the miracle of divine provision. It does not come from endless struggle, but from perfect surrender. And here lies the great secret. Struggle is rooted in the belief that you are your own source, but provision is rooted in the truth that God is your source. When you stop depending solely on yourself and start depending wholly on God, the struggle dissolves and the flow begins. Your effort is still required, yes, but it is no longer toil. It is inspired action. It is action fueled by guidance, timed by heaven, blessed by the shepherd himself, and such action always prospers. To live in divine provision is to rise each day with peace, to work with joy, to give with confidence, and to receive with gratitude. It is to know that your needs are already met before they even arise, that the shepherd has already prepared the pasture and the water, that the blessing is already on its way. Human struggle looks outward and sees lack. Divine provision looks upward and knows abundance. And once you taste the sweetness of provision, you will never again settle for the bitterness of struggle. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. These words are not merely poetry, not simply a line to recite in quiet devotion. They are a living law, a spiritual principle, a key that unlocks abundance in every area of life, including money. The Psalm 23 principle in finances is not theory, it is divine reality. It declares boldly that want has no power over the one who walks with the shepherd. It affirms that lack is an illusion, that fear is a shadow, and that true supply flows from an infinite source. When this truth is spoken with faith, believed with conviction, and lived with expectancy, money no longer becomes a struggle. It becomes a servant, flowing in alignment with divine order. People look at their bank accounts, their bills, their debts, and they declare, I want, I need, I lack. But the psalmist, standing in the light of divine revelation, declared the opposite: I shall not want. He did not say, I might not want someday, or perhaps my needs will be met. He spoke as if it were already done, already complete, already settled. That is the essence of this principles, speaking abundance into existence, not from what is seen, but from what is eternal. To live this way is to align with spiritual law, for what you declare with faith becomes the reality you experience. The sheep never doubts the shepherd. It does not rise each morning in fear, asking, will there be grass today? Will there be water for me? It simply follows, and provision is already there. Likewise, when you declare that the Lord is your shepherd in money, you affirm that every need is met before you even perceive it. The green pastures of provision and the still waters of financial peace are already prepared, waiting for you to step into them. Many people chase money as though it were their shepherd, following after it with desperation, and yet it always leads them into exhaustion, emptiness, and anxiety. But money was never meant to be the shepherd. It is not the leader, it is the follower. When God is the shepherd, money follows you. Opportunities follow you. Provision follows you. The Psalm 23 principle turns the pursuit around. No longer do you run after wealth, for wealth is commanded to come to you. This principle also carries the assurance of divine timing. The shepherd leads step by step, and every step is perfectly timed. There is no rushing, no delay, no missed blessing. What you need appears when you need it, not before, not after. This eradicates the fear of lack, for you know the provision is already on its way. Just as the shepherd guides the flock to green fields in season, God guides his children into opportunities of increase at the exact moment they are ready to receive them. And even when the path passes through the valley, where shadows of lack or debt seem to loom, the psalmist reminds us, I will fear no evil. Why? Because the shepherd is still present. Even in financial darkness, the rod and the staff, symbols of divine authority and protection, comfort and guide. No shadow of debt, no cloud of bills, no storm of uncertainty can overcome the one who walks with this principle alive in their spirit. For want cannot exist where the shepherd leads. The Psalm 23 principle is also about overflow. My cup runneth over. This is not the image of barely surviving, scraping by, or holding on with the last coin. It is the vision of abundance that overflows into every area of life. When your cup runs over, not only are your needs met, but you are empowered to bless others, to give generously, to become a channel of divine supply for the world. Overflow is the natural state of those who live in this principle. So when you stand and declare, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, you are not repeating a verse, you are activating a law. You are shifting your consciousness from lack to abundance, from fear to faith, from struggle to provision. You are reminding yourself that money is not your master, but your servant, that bills are not your burden, but opportunities for blessing, that lack is not your destiny, but abundance is your inheritance. This is the Psalm 23 principle in money: absolute trust, fearless declaration, and overflowing supply. Money is not struggle, money is energy, and until you see it that way, you will always chase it like a prisoner chasing freedom. The world has conditioned many to believe that money only comes through strain, through grinding effort, through endless worry. People rise each day already burdened, believing that if they do not fight and claw their way through, the money will slip away. Yet money is not designed to be a tormentor. It is not a heavy weight dragging you down. It is pure energy, and like all energy, it flows where it is welcomed, where it is aligned, where it is understood. When you shift your vision and see money as energy, you cease to struggle and begin to flow with it. Energy responds to vibration, to consciousness, to thought and feeling. Just as a magnet pulls metal, your inner state draws or repels money. A mind filled with fear, anxiety, and resentment pushes money away, because fear is the opposite vibration of abundance, but a mind filled with gratitude, expectancy, and faith pulls money in with magnetic force. Money, like electricity, moves along the lines of least resistance, and resistance is built through worry, through doubt, through the belief in struggle. Release the resistance, and suddenly the current flows, and what once felt blocked begins to move freely into your experience. Think of water flowing through a riverbed. When the bed is clogged with rocks and debris, the flow is slowed, restricted, diverted. But clear the channel, and the river rushes forward, filling every space. So it is with money. When the channel of your mind is blocked with fear, lack, and struggle, thinking, money's flow is interrupted. But when you clear it with faith, gratitude, and joy, the current of money flows easily, abundantly, unceasingly. It was never the water that lacked. It was only the channel that was clogged. The struggle mentality keeps people locked in cycles of exhaustion. They believe that without endless effort, there will be no reward. But when you live in the energy of money, you understand that effort is not the source. Alignment is. This does not mean you sit idle, waiting for gold to fall from the sky. It means that every inspired action you take, every step guided by faith, is charged with divine energy, multiplying your results far beyond what struggle could ever achieve. One step in alignment with energy is worth more than 1,000 steps taken in fear. Money is energy, and energy loves circulation. Just as air must flow, just as water must move, money too must be allowed to circulate. Hoarding from fear blocks the flow. Generosity, gratitude, and wise giving expand it. When you release money with trust, knowing it will return multiplied, you remain in the flow of circulation. And as it flows out, it must flow back in, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Struggle says, hold tightly, for there may not be enough. Energy says, release freely, for I am unlimited. The moment you stop treating money as a cruel master and begin to see it as energy, everything changes. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer fear, you expect. You no longer cling, you circulate. And in this shift, miracles occur. Unexpected income appears, debts dissolve, opportunities arrive, and money begins to serve you rather than enslave you. Struggle drains, but energy replenishes. Struggle limits, but energy expands. Struggle enslaves, but energy liberates. The choice is simple. Continue in the old belief that money is a fight, or embrace the higher truth that money is energy, flowing abundantly through the current of divine supply. When you live in this truth, every dollar you receive, every dollar you release, becomes charged with blessing. You step into rhythm with the universe itself, and the result is not struggle, but overflow. Lack is the greatest illusion the human mind has ever believed. It is the shadow that convinces men and women to live in fear, to cling tightly to crumbs when banquets of abundance are already prepared. Lack is not truth. It is a false appearance, a mirage that disappears the moment you see it through the eyes of spirit. The world shouts, there is not enough, but the shepherd whispers, all that I have is yours. When you awaken to this truth, the illusion dissolves, and you realize that abundance has been surrounding you all along, waiting for you to claim it. Everywhere we see the signs of this illusion. People competing with one another, believing that one's gain must be another's loss. Nations fighting wars over resources, businesses clawing at each other for market share, families torn apart by fear of poverty. All of it springs from the false belief that supply is limited, that only a few can prosper while others must be left behind. But the divine law is not limitation, it is expansion. The universe itself testifies. Stars are still being born, oceans are still full, seeds are still multiplying. Creation has never stopped expanding, and yet fear has tricked humanity into thinking there is not enough. When you see lack as real, You begin to act in ways that keep it alive. You shrink your vision, you refuse to give, you make choices from desperation instead of faith. You chase opportunities in panic and miss the ones prepared for you. But when you expose lack as an illusion, your entire being changes. You begin to walk with confidence, to speak words of abundance, to give freely, to expect miracles. You become a magnet to the flow of divine supply because you no longer bow to the lie of scarcity. Consider this: a child playing in the sun does not fear that the light will run out. The sun shines without end, so it is with divine supply. The source never dries, never weakens, never abandons. Yet people cower in shadows, convinced the light has gone. All it takes is turning, lifting the eyes, and realizing the light has been shining all along. In the same way, when you lift your eyes from fear and fix them on the shepherd, the illusion of lack disappears and the abundance of God is revealed. There are countless testimonies of those who lived under the illusion of lack until one moment of revelation shattered it. They believed there was no way, no hope, no provision, until suddenly a door opened, a check arrived, a debt was canceled, a need was met. They looked back and realized the supply was there all along, waiting just beyond the fog of fear. The truth had not changed. They had simply awakened to it. Overcoming lack begins with words, for words shape consciousness. Speak lack and you multiply it. Speak abundance and you awaken it. Declare with boldness, I live in an abundant universe. My supply is unlimited. God is my shepherd. I shall not want. These words pierce the illusion, break the chains of fear, and open the floodgates of provision. And as you speak, act accordingly. Give as though you are abundant. Plan as though you are abundant. Expect as though you are abundant. In doing so, you align yourself with the truth that abundance is not coming someday. It is here now. The illusion of lack has no power over the soul that knows its source. Lack cannot frighten the one who trusts in divine provision. Lack cannot hold captive the one who declares freedom in the shepherd's care. Each time the appearance of lack rises, stand firm and call it what it is: a shadow, a falsehood, a lie. For the truth is unshakable. Your supply is infinite. Your provision is assured. Your abundance is already prepared. Overcome the illusion of lack, and you will never again bow to fear. Instead, you will live in the radiant reality of divine overflow. Miracles are not rare events reserved for the chosen few. They are the natural results of trusting in divine supply. When you understand that God is your shepherd, you begin to expect miracles, and when you expect them, they appear. Stories of divine supply are not distant legends. They are living testimonies, proof that heaven's storehouse is never empty and that no one who leans fully on Spirit is ever abandoned. Each story whispers the same truth: provision is not earned by struggle, but received by faith. There are countless accounts of individuals who stood at the brink of despair, with no visible way forward, and suddenly the door of provision opened. A woman staring at an overdue bill prays, declaring, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And before the day ends, a forgotten refund check arrives in the mail, covering the exact amount. A man facing financial ruin decides to surrender his fear, affirming that divine supply is already his, and within days, a new business opportunity presents itself, bringing not only survival, but abundance. These are not coincidences, they are miracles of alignment, reminders that God's supply flows perfectly when faith replaces fear. One powerful story tells of a family with no food left in their kitchen. Instead of collapsing into despair, they set the table, lit the candles, and thanked God for the meal they believed was already on its way. Moments later, a knock came at the door, and a neighbor, moved by an unseen impulse, brought bags of groceries. That night, they dined like royalty, not because of chance, but because faith activated divine supply. The table became an altar, the meal a miracle. Another story speaks of a man who was drowning in debt. Every attempt to fix it through human means seemed to fail. Finally, he released his desperate efforts and declared boldly that his debts were dissolved in divine order. He stopped confessing lack and began affirming abundance. Within weeks, a business deal came through that not only cleared his debt, but left him with overflow. He later said the moment he stopped struggling and trusted the shepherd was the moment everything shifted. His miracle was not just financial, it was the liberation of his spirit from the bondage of fear. There are also miracles that come in unexpected forms. A woman prays for money to pay rent, but instead of receiving cash, she receives an offer to move into a better home rent-free for several months. Another prays for a job, but instead is led to create her own business, which flourishes far beyond the salary she once sought. The miracle is not always what we imagine, but it is always greater than we expect. Divine supply comes in perfect form, perfect time, perfect measure, often surprising us with blessings far beyond our limited requests. Miracle stories of divine supply teach us that God works through channels we cannot predict. Sometimes it is through people moved by compassion, sometimes through sudden inspiration, sometimes through opportunities that appear out of nowhere. But the source is always the same: divine love, infinite abundance, the shepherd who never fails his flock. When we trust, when we affirm, when we act in faith, we open ourselves to this flow, and the miracles rush in. Each testimony is a reminder that what has been done for one can be done for another. If supply has appeared for them, it can and will appear for you. Miracles are the natural outcome of living in alignment with divine truth. When you hear these stories, let them ignite your faith. Say to yourself, if it happened for them, it will happen for me. If supply flowed for them, it is flowing for me now. For the shepherd is no respecter of persons. His storehouse is infinite, his provision unfailing, his miracles unending. Trust, believe, expect, and you too will have your own story of divine supply to tell. A story that will inspire others to step into the river of miracles, prepared for all who dare to believe. Gratitude is the golden key that seals every blessing and multiplies every miracle. It is the spiritual cement that fixes abundance in your life so that it cannot slip away. Without gratitude, blessings may come and go unnoticed, but with gratitude, they grow, expand, and return again in greater measure. Gratitude is not a passive feeling. It is an active force, a magnetic current that draws divine supply closer and anchors it firmly in your experience. When you give thanks before the blessing, during the blessing, and after the blessing, you align yourself with heaven's rhythm, and nothing can stop the flow. So many people receive answers to prayer, yet instead of lifting their hearts in thanks, they quickly move on, worrying about the next need, the next bill, the next challenge. In doing so, they leave the door of blessing half open, never realizing that gratitude is what pushes it wide. Gratitude is the multiplier, the sealant, the confirmation that says, I trust this blessing. I honor this blessing. I am ready for more. Just as a farmer waters his field to ensure the harvest continues, so does gratitude water the field of your life, ensuring that the blessings never wither but remain in constant bloom. Gratitude is also the language of faith. To thank God before the answer appears is to declare, I know it is already mine. When you rise in the morning and give thanks for provision, for supply, for overflow, even before you see it in your account, you are affirming your trust in the shepherd's care. You are saying, I do not need to see it to believe it. I know it is done. That level of gratitude seals the blessing because it moves beyond circumstance into conviction. Gratitude turns desire into possession, prayer into reality, expectation into manifestation. Think of those who live in constant complaint, always speaking of what they lack, what they do not have, what has not yet come. Their words create walls that block the flow of supply. But those who live in gratitude, even in the smallest things, create open channels through which abundance pours in. A grateful heart can turn little into much, a few coins into overflow, a single opportunity into a lifetime of increase. Gratitude magnifies whatever it touches. There are countless testimonies of miracles sealed by gratitude. A woman who received just enough to pay her rent fell on her knees, praising God as though she had been given millions. Her joy overflowed, her thanks rang out, and within weeks, unexpected income poured into her life far beyond her rent. Gratitude unlocked the greater blessing because she treated the little as much. Another man, struggling in business, began each day not by listing his problems, but by listing his blessings. He thanked God for his health, his ideas, his opportunities, and his faith. Soon, doors opened, contracts came, and his business flourished. Gratitude sealed his blessings and expanded them into prosperity. Even in Scripture, we see the power of gratitude. When Jesus lifted 5 loaves and 2 fish and gave thanks, they multiplied to feed thousands. Gratitude was the force that sealed the miracle and expanded it into overflow. If thanksgiving could multiply bread and fish, can it not also multiply money, opportunities, and supply? Gratitude declares that what you have is enough, and in declaring it enough, it becomes more than enough. Gratitude is not reserved only for great blessings. It is the daily practice of recognizing the good already present. Every breath, every meal, every sunrise is a reason to give thanks. And as you build this attitude of gratitude, you create a vibration that attracts more to be thankful for. Gratitude becomes the seal, the magnet, the container that holds abundance in your life and ensures that it continues. Without gratitude, blessings slip through your fingers like water. With gratitude, blessings are held, multiplied, and transformed into rivers of supply that never run dry. When you live in gratitude, you live in continuous overflow. You declare with your words, your actions, your very spirit, I am supplied, I am blessed, I am rich in every way. Gratitude seals the blessing because it affirms that you are already walking in abundance, and abundance always responds to the heart that knows how to give thanks. To live as a financial testimony is to walk as living proof that God's promises are true, that divine supply is real, and that abundance is not a theory but a daily reality. Your life itself becomes the evidence, the sermon, the shining example that others cannot ignore. When people look at you, they see not just numbers in a bank account, but the overflow of peace, confidence, and provision that flows from trusting the shepherd. Your finances, instead of being a source of fear, become a declaration of faith, a message that says, look what God has done for me, and He can do it for you too. So many speak of faith, but few demonstrate it in the realm of money. They believe God can heal, they believe He can save, but when it comes to provision, they shrink back, bound by fear. Yet to be a financial testimony is to stand boldly and say, I shall not want, for my shepherd supplies every need. It is not to boast in wealth, but to radiate the assurance that you are cared for, guided, and supplied in ways that cannot be explained by human struggle. This kind of testimony speaks louder than any sermon, because abundance seen is more powerful than abundance only spoken. Living as a financial testimony does not mean flaunting riches or measuring your worth by possessions. It means living in such a way that others witness your peace in times of uncertainty, your generosity in times of need, your gratitude in times of blessing, and your fearlessness in times of trial. It means people ask you, how do you always seem to have enough? How do you remain calm when others are anxious? And your answer becomes the testimony, because the Lord is my shepherd. He has never failed me. There are countless examples of lives transformed into testimonies. Someone once burdened by crushing debt now speaks of miraculous provision that lifted the weight, and their very story becomes a beacon of hope for others still in bondage. Another who once scraped by paycheck to paycheck now lives in overflow, not because of sudden fortune, but because they shifted their faith, aligned with divine order, and allowed God to be their provider. Their life becomes the sermon others need to hear. A true financial testimony is not just about receiving, it is about giving. Overflow is never meant to stop with you, it is designed to pour through you. When you bless others, when you give freely, when you extend a helping hand, you amplify your testimony. People see that your abundance is not selfish but spirit-led. They witness that you are a channel of supply, not just a container of it. And this giving seals the testimony, proving that divine provision is limitless, for as you give, more always returns. To live this way requires courage, for the world will often try to shake your faith with appearances of lack, with whispers of doubt, with shadows of fear. But every time you respond with trust instead of panic, gratitude instead of complaint, generosity instead of hoarding, you strengthen your testimony. You show the world that your supply is not dependent on markets, jobs, or circumstances. It is rooted in the unshakable law of divine abundance. Living as a financial testimony means that your very life preaches without words. Your peace preaches, your joy preaches, your ability to meet needs preaches, your generosity preaches, and the world cannot argue with a testimony because it is visible, undeniable, and real. To live as a testimony is to say with every action, I am the proof, God supplies, God provides, God overflows. And in doing so, you not only bless your own life, but inspire countless others to rise in faith, to break the chains of lack, and to step boldly into the abundant life already prepared for them.